Now I would like to hear Menon and his perspective on financing, regulation, and so on, and how to actually put the right incentives for these things to happen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And so moving away from the smart grid or the smart grid sector and looking at the other aspect of our session, which is clean energy, I thought I'll put up a couple of slides to just explain what's happening in India on the renewable energy front. And you would have heard from a lot of speakers here about how there is a strong push in the country to promote renewable energy. And we are not just looking merely at capacity addition, we are actually looking at replacing the existing conventional power with renewable power. It's a huge challenge. We're a huge country, but the attempts have started in the right earnest. So quickly, why do we need to look at renewable energy? I mean, we have the third largest reserves of coal in the country. So why would anyone in the right sense of mind would look at investing a lot of capex into renewable energy? This is why. So despite what the generation that we have currently, we have a peak deficit of 3.2% at any given point in time. We depend on 80% of oil imports for energy needs. And we are likely to need more than 3 to 4 times our current energy needs for the projected development. So what's our current mix? We have coal leading, and if you look at hydro, which is the other big source of energy, that's at about 42,000 megawatt, odd 42,000 megawatt. Renewable sources is again similar. I've classified it separately from hydro because large hydro projects do not fall under renewable energy categorization in the Indian context. That's a separate category. So renewable energy is also at about 42,000 odd megawatt. Now, what's our status and what's our potential for this investment? So the Prime Minister has set a target of 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022. That's a very, very large number. Personally, I believe even if we are able to do half of it, we would have done very well. That is the target, and we are all, all stakeholders are working towards it. But you speak to everyone in the industry, they'll tell you that it is a very large number, which requires a lot of investment. We are hoping to see that, but we'll have to see how it goes. If you look at wind is, we are looking to add 60 gigawatts within this 175. Solar, we're looking to add 100 gigawatts, out of which 40 gigawatts are going to be rooftop solar. So for the decentralized generation, we're looking at 40 gigawatts of rooftop solar, and the remaining 15 gigawatts from hydro. So what are the growth drivers for the sector? I'll focus on one of the aspects which is very relevant in the current Indian context, is the drop in equipment prices, both wind and solar. We have seen some extremely aggressive bidding in the solar sector in the last 6 to 8 months. Tariffs have dropped below 10 cents a unit, and that, I believe and I'm told, is largely because of a drop in equipment prices globally for solar equipment. In wind as well, we are seeing that trend. Largely, wind tariffs in India are still determined by the regulatory commissions, which are quasi-judicial bodies who determine tariffs for a certain control period. But very soon, wind is likely to move into a competitive bidding regime, which is largely followed in solar. So coming to the key features that promote RE in India, we have the National Solar Mission, which is a flagship program of the central government, which provides a very bankable, robust PPA structure for purchase and sale of power. And why this is important is because, unlike the state model of every state has their own policy for development of renewable energy, including solar, they have their own PPAs where a generator would sell power to a distribution company in the state. Many of us here would know that the financial health of state distribution utilities in India is not the best. And hence, the central government came up with the National Solar Mission, where it introduced the concept of an intermediary central agency with a strong balance sheet to backstop payments from state distribution companies. So the generator would sell to a central agency, who would then sell to a distribution company to insulate the generator from any payment defaults. Now, this has taken off very well. over the last about 1.5 to 2 years, we have seen about close to 2,000 megawatt of solar energy being bid under this program. We also have the solar park scheme, which I should mention is a very recent phenomenon. So in India, the largest challenge to do any kind of project, any energy infrastructure project, is land. The biggest challenge. We are a large country, we have lots of land, but to get land suitable to develop your project is a huge challenge. So the government knows about it. What the government did is to come out with a solar park scheme, where the central government, through cooperating with the state government, sets up a solar park which has shovel-ready land. So it's a fenced, shovel-ready land for the bidders to come and develop their projects. They don't have to go around the hassle of obtaining land. All the permissions for conversion of use, etc., are all already obtained, and you can start away constructing your power project. So that's a very positive move from the central government in encouraging development of solar projects. We also are coming up with a national wind mission, following on the success of the national solar mission. The government aims at following the same model for wind projects. That's still in the planning stage, but we should hear about it soon. Transmission, like a lot of my learned speakers here mentioned about smart grids and the need for smart grids. One of the biggest challenges in India is transmission constraints. The penetration of the transmission or the conventional grid to all the renewable rich areas. We don't have enough transmission backbone to support the renewable energy power flow. So what the government is doing is also building a green energy corridor, which will be a dedicated transmission corridor to connect various renewable energy stations to the load centers. It's a KFW funded program, and it's already the work on the transmission corridor has started, and likely in 2 to 3 years that should be up. These are some support mechanisms by the central government in terms of fiscal incentives, in terms of tax incentives that are available for developing renewable energy projects. I won't spend too much time. If you have any doubts, you could reach out to me. One aspect that I would like to highlight is the 8% SPO. SPO is Solar Purchase Obligation. So by year 2022, the country has to have 8% of solar energy in its overall energy mix. So each obligated entity that that has to procure renewable energy should have up to 8% of solar energy in its mix. Now, this is a huge boost to development of solar projects, because otherwise the state distribution companies that buy power are usually very hesitant to buy renewable power. One, because of the price. Two, because they kind of disturb the grid. The grid is not able to manage the frequencies, so they stay away from renewable energy power. But because of this mandatory requirement to have a certain percentage of energy mix coming from renewable energy and solar, that's going to help the development of the sector. These are the tax incentive. You have 100% tax holiday for 10 consecutive years, then a minimum alternate tax of 20%. There is deemed export benefits for procurement of renewable energy goods. You have a customs and excise benefits for importing these goods. And very recently, the central government has, through the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, waived interstate transmission charges for sale and supply of renewable power. So if you have a renewable energy plant, say in northern India, you can actually find a customer in the very southern end and transmit the power without really having to pay the interstate transmission charges, which earlier were quite prohibitive. So what are the structures for doing these projects and selling power? Largely, historically, renewable energy has been sold under a feed-in tariff regime. Like I mentioned earlier, feed-in tariff is a tariff set by a regulator, which is a quasi-judicial body for a certain control period. Now we are moving from the feed-in tariff regime to a competitive bid regime, where the market determines the tariff for the power. We have favorable land policies now. So other than solar parks, if you want to develop, say, a hydro project or a wind project, various states are coming out with deemed conversion of land from agricultural to non-agricultural use, so that it can be easily, work can easily start without having to wait for these approvals. There are also land banks being allocated by state governments dedicated for these projects, so that you don't have to go around trying to find and procure private land. You have exemption from merit order dispatch, which means that typically merit order dispatch, as most of you would know, is cheapest power is sourced first by the grid. So for renewable energy, there is an exemption. The grid is required to procure all power generated from renewable energy sources. They are must-run stations. So you have a certainty of power supply and power offtake. Oh, is it? Okay. So potential sources that we are seeing in the market, both equity and debt, various forms of equity, various kinds of lenders who are willing to provide debt for financing these projects. This is just a chart of what the typical lending interest rates are currently in India from various types of lenders, and what you would look, if you were to develop a project, what you would get. Some very key challenges that, everything is positive. The central government has a very positive approach to development, but I cannot say that everything is rosy. There are still a couple of challenges that we have to deal with in the sector. One main being equity lock-in. I don't know, I mean, it's not a very global phenomenon, but in India, for some reason, we insist that the promoter or the sponsor of a project has to be locked into the project for a certain number of years. The rationale behind that is that any entity who has bid for a project should be serious enough to see that project through. But what that restricts is the churn of equity. You have different categories of stakeholders who can take risks and obligations in different phases of the project. By putting in a lock-in, you're trying to restrict that churn of equity, which is hampering the growth of the sector. You have, like I said, evacuation, transmission infrastructure challenges, and in commercial challenges, the most important one would be the L1 challenge. L1, lowest bidder, cheapest is not always best. We are for some odd reason, we keep going for the cheapest tariff, the cheapest equipment, the cheapest source of legal advice, but no. It is not always the best, and we have seen that experience in the conventional sector, where there was very aggressive bidding for ultra mega power projects. 5 of them, just 1, and I think 2 are just commissioned now, 3 have not. So our suggestion to the government also has been that let's not follow the L1 approach, because that's not really going to help the sector.